When your child is in the middle of a tantrum, do you start to worry that maybe, just maybe, it is actually your permissiveness that makes them tantrum more? My name's Jodie Thornton, and I know that for those of us on the more progressive end of the parenting scale, while we can inherently know that we want our children to feel like their feelings are always valid and always welcome, it can be easy when we're in the real thick of a tantrum, it can be easy to really struggle to recognize that it's not our permissiveness that is making this happen. And those doubts that in the moment of like, this is my permissiveness that is causing this, it actually takes you away from being really present and connected to your child in that moment. And it takes you away from being able to respond to your child's tantrums. And so what I want to do is, rather than just say, no, it's not your permissiveness, don't worry about it, I actually want to break down why it's not your permissiveness and what we do need to do to help your child so that you don't have to have this worry anymore. So if we look at this from the very first angle, which is my permissiveness of my child's feelings is why they're having a tantrum. Now, on this angle, I want to look at, like, if we assume that's true, right? If we assume that that's actually true, the only way to counter that would be in some way to not permit your child's feelings. So maybe it might be a scale of permission. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is dial down your permissiveness of your child's feelings, which inherently means you're going to dial up the invalidation of your child's feelings. And we know the impact of that, right? This is the reason why you're following someone like me, is that you know that the impact of your feelings being invalidated when you were a child, you know the impact that that's had on your life, on not having a connection or understanding of your own feelings, of feeling like your needs are not worthy or valid or need to be taken into consideration. And also for many of us, it pushes us into people pleasing because we focus on everybody else's feelings and needs and not our own. And so you know that that's not what we want for your child, right? So that's the first piece. The second piece is that our permissiveness of our child's behavior and our permissiveness of our child actually being allowed to have their own preferences or their own, speaking up for themselves or advocating for themselves, like our permissiveness in that space in a way that wouldn't be acceptable to someone with a more old school parenting approach. Is it that permissiveness that's causing the tantrums? And here's where we fundamentally misunderstand what a tantrum is. So if we look at what a tantrum is, your child has a feeling come up. That feeling is a signal that they need something. And if we don't address the actual need, then the feeling will continue unless we repress it, or we deny it, or we form a belief that our feelings are not necessary, or we distract ourselves from it, right? So that being the case, the children that are not allowed to have their feelings, they're not allowed to behave in certain ways, they don't believe that what they need matters, they still have the need come up. They still have the feeling come up, but because they have been conditioned to push it down, or to distract themselves, or they have basically formed a belief that it's not okay for me to have big feelings, or it's not okay for me to need things, then they don't get the tantrum. But the cause is still there, right? The cause of the tantrum is still there, but they have been conditioned not to have a tantrum. And we know that that's not the aim we have for our parenting. We don't want to be in a position where our children are having the situation that requires a tantrum or that would lead them to a tantrum that is quashed. We have the situation still arrive, but it just gets quashed in order to make it comfortable for everybody else that, they're not out of control with their emotions. And obviously for us, it is quite draining, right? If we're having a child that's tantruming quite often, it's really, really hard. If we find other people's emotions very difficult to hold space for, having a child that's continually tantruming, it's really, really difficult, right? So there are obviously reasons why we might want them to be having less tantrum, but we don't want to get there through quashing their feelings in one way or another. So that being the case, what do we need to do? We need to help our children learn how to build the skills to understand what their feelings are telling them about their needs and to become really capable and skillful problem solvers, right? This is the piece that's missing in a lot of gentle parenting. So a lot of gentle parenting, it's basically, what would be the right words? It's a lot of gentle parenting is like you're allowed to have the feeling that you have, but you just get used to like not caring, right? In a very gentle, slow, incremental way. We just get used to the fact that sometimes we have feelings and they're just there and we just leave them there. And that's the piece that makes gentle parenting really hard. If we never actually recognize what does the feeling tell us about the need, then we don't end up finding solutions that work not just for your child, but everybody else that's involved. And that's where we end up getting to a place where we doubt whether we're capable of being a gentle parent. I see a lot of parents, they say things like, I'm just not cut out for this. Like, other parents can gentle parent, but I just can't. And the reason for that is that we're doing it the hard way, right? And we're doing it the hard way because everyone has told us to do it the hard way. But really what we need to be doing is get our children the capacity to understand their feelings, to understand their needs, and to become problem solvers. Now, there's a progression here, right? We're not going to start out expecting a 3-year-old to know how to articulate and problem solve all the time. But one of my favorite examples of problem solving, emotional awareness and problem solving is actually from my daughter Alyssa when she was 2.5, right? They can do it from a very young age, but we don't need them to be capable independently in order for this to become very easy for us as gentle parents. The more they can articulate what they're feeling, the more we can help them identify what that means about what they need. And then the more we can be the ones who are the problem solvers in an effective way. So if we think about, for those of us who feel like we're the feelings managers of the house, it's like we're absorbing the feelings. It's like we're always having to try to get everybody else to feel okay, and it's exhausting. Being an effective problem solver, however, is actually moving to looking at what works for everybody involved. And the more often we do that, the more skillful we become, and the more it becomes a natural way of being. One of the things I talk about from time to time is that my husband thinks that the way I parent is, it's fine and all, but it's really over the top and unnecessary. However, I hear my words come out of his mouth all the time. And I don't ask him whether he recognizes that they are my words, and I don't want him to stop doing it just because he hasn't noticed, right? My way of parenting has become some of how he parents without me even trying to change him. And a lot of how I handle things has changed how my younger children actually problem solve and how they communicate. So it's not a case of we want children to be independent problem solvers at a very young age. It's also not a case that you being the leader of the problem solving means that it's going to be hard forever and it's always your job. There's a spectrum here, and a journey. We're going to move through that, but it gets easier. What I say is, when you're working on this, it will get easier and easier every 2 weeks. If it's not getting easier within 2 weeks, then we need to figure out what's not shifting along the way, what's stuck along the way. And so this is the thing where I really would like you to notice how much, when I'm doubting myself, as is it because of my permissiveness, that is the moment where we notice that we're getting pulled into this cultural narrative that it's the parent's fault, as opposed to our culture is shifting and changing really quickly from what used to be old school parenting into a lot of people moving into the gentle and more progressive spaces. But we haven't yet gotten to a place where it's standard in our culture to have genuine emotional awareness, to move into that actual skillful problem solving. And that's the place where gentle parenting gets easier. That's the place where you start to see your children. We're not just parenting in a way we know is better for them and then hoping they're going to be okay when they're adults. You can see them progressively building the skills of emotional awareness, progressively building the skills to communicate how they feel and advocate for themselves respectfully, but also have consideration for other people. You can see them progressively building the skills to problem solve in a way that works for everyone that's involved, and not just themselves, but also not just always do what everybody else wants and acquiesce what's important to themselves. So if this is something that you'd like to get into more detail with, the very first step is actually to help your child to regulate their feelings when they're tantruming, and get underneath that feeling to figure out what is the real reason that they are upset, and look for ways to solve that. And those steps, the practical step-by-step of how to do that, is in my webinar, Supporting Kids Through Tantrums. You can register for that at jodithornton.com/tantrums, and I will look forward to seeing you there.